Alright, so for the next demonstration, I actually pulled up an image of a termite mound. And why I pulled up an image of a termite mound, I have no idea. I was actually trying to look for some sort of rock structure, and I got termite mound, and I was like, this is cool. Alright, let's do it. So I picked out this image, and I thought it would be appropriate to show you guys kind of the next step of understanding lighting. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to get the layer that the image is on, and I'm going to actually drop the opacity down. And the reason being is that I just want to identify the object, and not necessarily the lighting, but the object itself. So I'm going to go ahead and trace this termite mound like structure. And for those of you that are entirely grossed out and thinking about all the nasties that are going in here, just pretend that this is some sort of Utah canyon. So I'm going to draw all the forms here, and I'm not going to get too descriptive with all of the details, but just enough so that we understand the basic geometry. And let's just say for kicks, I'm going to add in just some shrubs here. And let's just go ahead and add in I was thinking about doing a cactus plant, but I don't think that's gonna work out because I just don't know what that looks like. Alright, so let's just go ahead and do another shrub here and some more shrubs. I'm gonna add in some rocks, and I'm obviously kind of altering this image, but I just want to show you guys a couple of different objects here and how I'm going to demonstrate different lighting scenarios on this. Okay, so let's say we got this sort of object. Let's just do another one back here. I'll just pick this one out. This guy seems a little lonely. And it's weird, these rocks can look incredibly phallic, so please do not get any ideas. I promise you this was not intentional. It just looks, why it looks like this, I have no idea. Alright, and we'll add some more shrubbery back there. So I'm actually going to turn off this layer and just use this here as just a basic footprint for just kind of trying out some different lighting scenarios here. So let's just put this guy right behind here, and I'm just gonna put this within a frame. So here we have our drawing. Okay, so let's title this drawing. And feel free to add whatever extra details. Just gonna alter this. And when you guys are doing this exercise, you guys don't have to pick weird phallic rock structures. Feel free to pick your own objects. I don't know why I decided to use this for the demo, but I thought I was going to be painting or drawing a canyon. Let's see here. Alright, so let's say we got something like this to start off. And kind of repeating what we had here in all of our lighting scenarios, starting with top lighting, I want to test out how it would affect the object here. So if the light is if the light is beaming from the top here, and the sun is obviously up here, I know for a fact that even based on looking at the photograph here, that there's a lot of details that are represented just through the use of light and dark, that I can actually translate the same details even when this object is being top lit. So just like how we handle the sphere, I can confidently say that the light is most likely coming from the top, right? So it's hitting the object here, and then there's a lot of shadow beneath. So I'm going to say the light is hitting from the top here. And all of these details I'm obviously kind of improvising here, but I'm saying that the light is going to be coming from the top, and that there's a fair amount of shadow just because of the way this object looks, or the way the forms are, that is casting small little shadows here. And even underneath these rocks, I'm going to get shadow on the bottoms. And even here, I can confidently say that this rock right here is casting a shadow onto itself. So I'm going to put a portion of this here in shadow. And it almost kind of looks like it's side lit, right? And so it just depends on how much light is actually hitting this object. So I'm just going to say that a good majority of this here is actually being lit. And there's a large amount of cast shadow here. And I'm going to do the same thing with the shrubs here. It's a cast shadow. So anything that's facing upwards is going to be lit. Anything that's facing downwards is actually going to be in shadow. And the ground is extremely lit, because the ground is facing directly up, right? This is the ground, and the ground is being lit, and it's facing directly up at the sun, so it's going to be relatively pretty bright and white. So let's go ahead and do this object in the back here, this rock form. I'm going to cheat a little bit and say that it has actually really strong shadows underneath, so we can really sell it that it's being lit from the top. And again, this is going based off of that basic concept of using even a box, right? If a box is being lit from the top, say the sun is here, we know that this is going to be in light, right? But the sides here are not getting any light at all. Now, when it comes to ambient light and bounce light, it is theoretically going to be receiving light, but in the context of a black and white graphic drawing like we're doing here, this is actually going to be all in darkness. And this is a very, very graphic representation of this sort of lighting scenario, but in the most direct, and that's exactly what I want to represent here. And even this, and we can even say that the sky, to push the lighting scenario, is slightly darker, just to really get the forms to read. And the way I'm doing that is I'm just going to make a selection around this. But just to show you guys as a demonstration that it's being top lit, right? Obviously, we wouldn't be using 3 values here. It would most likely be like that. It'll be top lit. But just so that you guys can understand where the lighting scenario is coming from. It's coming from the top. And so we're going to get a lot of the shadows underneath and the light from the top. So this is top lighting. Now let's do backlighting. So backlighting is pretty simple, right? The concept is simple. The sun is back here. Everything's going to be backlit. So this object here, if we imagine that this is a sun, then everything that's facing away from it is actually going to be in shadow. So a lot of this stuff here, we can almost guarantee that this is actually going to be in shadow here. And maybe there's just some elements here that are kind of being lit. Just a sliver of it, of this mound, is actually being lit by light. But for the most part, this is all going to be silhouetted, right? So we can just make a good educated guess that this is going to actually be most likely in shadow. So if you want to have slivers of light, you can, that are facing a little bit of the sun. For the most part, it's going to be backlit. Same with the rocks, the shrubs. I mean, the shrubs at this point, I mean, it's safe to say that this is all going to be silhouetted. The rocks are going to be all silhouetted. And I'm just going to show a little sliver of light. Same with this rock mound here. It's all going to be in shadow. And even the mountain back here is going to be in shadow too. So if I have this kind of lighting scenario, right, where do you think the shadow would be? The cast shadow for these objects. They'd be coming towards us, right? So that's where we can really indicate that this thing is being strongly backlit. Just mainly due to the direction of the cast shadows here. And depending on how low the sun is, the longer the cast shadows are going to be. And we can almost probably, a lot of the bottom section of this frame is actually going to be in shadow, just because it's going to be casting a really long shadow, right? That's why a lot of concept art and film actually use this lighting scenario, because look how dramatic it looks already. Right? It looks really cool. Just have everything backlit. It's all mysterious. And it makes just for a really moody scene. Just some more pebbles and things like that are most likely casting shadows here. Maybe there's some more rocks and mounds. And look how informational that this gets. Even as a backlit object, there's so much information. Right? Look at the top lit object. Everything is relatively kind of evenly lit, right? And the shadows are very shallow, and they're all underneath the object. And that's why I took the artistic liberty to put as much shadow information on this rock. Otherwise, it would look like just a big blank object, right? Nothing interesting going on. So this is top lighting. Oh, I mean backlighting. Whoops. This is top lighting. Next, we have side lighting. One of my favorites. Side lighting always makes for such a good, you know, dramatic, but also it explains the most amount of forms just because we have the most amount of light versus dark. So the sun is coming this way, and we're going to use the cube as an example again. And the cube here, if the light was coming from the side, we know for a fact that this is the light side and that this is going to be the shadow side, right? Or the dark side. So it's good to make a safe bet that this is most likely going to be in dark. And depending on the angle of the light here, if it's low, then the top is going to be dark. If it's 3/4 high, then we can almost say that both sides are going to be relatively light. Either way, we're having a good distribution between light and dark, plus the shadow that's casting. So the shadow that casts is also going to be a good indicator that the object is being side lit, just because of the direction of the shadow. And this already looks very, very dynamic as an image because we're getting lots of information here. So going back to this rock mount, I can safely say that a lot of the forms here are going to be side lit. And just like the cube, there's going to be a good distribution of light and dark. And it's up to us how much light versus dark we want to showcase in this scenario. But we don't want to favor one more than the other because it's going to confuse the audience that it might be backlit if it's too shadowed, and if it's too light, it might look like it's being front lit. So we want to make sure that it's fairly distributed in a way where it showcases light and dark. And I'm just making some lasso selections here, just to paint just some details rather than having to use a brush. And the brush that I'm using is actually a fairly simple diagonal round brush. I actually took a hard brush here, a regular hard brush, and I went into the brush settings and I actually just kind of crunched the shape, flattened the shape a little bit, just so it gives me nice flats. Lasso this side, give it just a little bit more shadow here, just to kind of vary it up. And then we're going to go down to the rocks. The rocks themselves are also going to have some side lighting. Right? So one side is going to be in shadow and the other side is going to be lit. Even the shrubs. One side is going to be in shadow and the other side is going to be lit. Right? So depending on the angle here, this side of the shrub is going to be lit, and also what's facing towards the back facing sides of these leaves are going to be backlit. So now we have this awesome side lit termite mound. Okay, let's do these other objects here, these rocks. So typically what I like to do is I like to shade all of the objects that are being lit individually before I start doing any cast shadows, just because it's easy to get, it can get really overly complex, and I just want to make sure that the objects themselves are relatively reading clear and they all have the right cast shadows, or the right shadows, I mean, the right shadow side before getting into cast shadows. Some of these ridges here on the ground probably have slight shadow side. And now I'm going to do the cast shadow. So just like the cast shadow on the cube, the cast shadow is going to go sideways, right? Because it's being side lit. So I'm going to do all the little rocks first. Make sure that it's being side lit. Let's go ahead and marquee or create a little selection around this box so we don't go off the page here. Do a little shadow of the shrubs. Shadow of these shrubs here. Kind of get all of the basics in. Some more, maybe some little pebbles and stuff are getting cast shadows. And now the cast shadow of this large mound. So this large mound is probably covering this rock, and it's just eating everything up, right? So we're gonna get this large cast shadow. That's how I'm determining the shadow side for this. And even the shrub is also gonna get shadow, cast shadow as well. It's probably going over the rock mounds here. And this is the reason why I wanted to kind of do all the small objects first before we get into the large one, because it gets very complex. You can see already that there's a lot of overlaps happening. And maybe there's just another cast shadow in the corner here. And we're missing just a little bit of the shrub. I'm just gonna get just some light hitting on the leaves here. So I felt like it just kind of disappeared when we put the cast shadow. So I just want to indicate just some of those shrubs back. And this thing is just, yeah, this is all in shadow right here. So this is side lighting. And notice how, you know, when I'm doing these types of lighting scenarios, especially for the graphic nature of this type of sketch, I'm keeping the shadows and all of the details relatively simple. And that's kind of the trick to getting these sketches to read very clearly, is you want to have a nice simple graphic representation. Because if it gets any more detailed than this, then it starts becoming a full rendering at that point, and it's better to almost just have nice simple graphic reads. So for those of you that are trying this at home, just be sure to keep it simple at first and then add the necessary details if it's lacking any. Just gonna add more shadow here. Maybe there's like a little bird or something. You can have fun with this, you know? Beep. So that's kind of the side lighting scenario here. Alright, last but not least, front lighting. So again, this is probably the trickiest one just because everything tends to look flat. But let's say the light is right here in front of this object. we know for a fact that all of this is actually going to be lit in the front. So just to do a little quick diagram again, we did diagrams of the sphere, but if we had a cube and it's being front lit, right? The light's coming in. I draw like the most crappiest suns here. But we can safely say that the light is coming in and it's casting a shadow behind the object. Right? So we're most likely can get something like this. Probably casting a shadow that's going behind the object. So this is saying that the light is directly in front of us. If it's slightly a little bit 3/4, then we can almost say, well, the shadow is creeping around, but it's definitely being casted like this. If the light happens to be very low, then it's gonna light these two faces here, light and light. The top side is actually going to be darker. Then at that point we're saying that the light is very low. So let's go ahead and apply that to this drawing here. I'm going to render this. So this is almost like, imagine this is going to be a combination of what we did on the side lighting, but it's going to be even more front lit, right? So it's going to have more shallow shadows here, being very, very not as descriptive as our side lighting here, but the shadows are almost very thin, because the front side is actually being lit very, very brightly and is being lit very directly. So a lot of this stuff here is actually fairly narrow in terms of the shadow here. So we're not getting as much information. It almost looks very flat, right? And that's the thing about front lighting, is that it tends to look and make a lot of objects look very flat. And even these rocks here are not getting any shadow information. It's all kind of peeking behind it. Same with the shrubs too. The shrubs, there's only maybe 1 or 2 leaves that are in shadow because it's casting a shadow onto itself. Same with this rock in the back here. Very shallow in form. Shrubs, some additional rocks. And that's kind of what we get, right? It's very boring. Now, in order to really sell this, what do we need? We need the shadow, right? The cast shadow. The cast shadow is what's going to help explain the direction of light. So this is where I'm actually going to be casting a shadow, not towards us, but away from us. And so this is going to explain how the object is actually being lit. And so we're going to have really large cast shadows back here from these rocks and this mound. And it's kind of going away from us, and it's almost actually nicely framing a lot of these details. And when we have shrubs like this, we can say, well, the shrubs here are casting a shadow onto the rocks. And that's how we justify the legibility of these shrubs. And just to kind of really sell this point of lighting, I can say that there's maybe another object in front casting a shadow here. You know, maybe there's some more rocks or something. Casting a shadow here. And just to really sell the lighting scenario here, I'm actually going to make a selection around this rock mound. Let's do that. It's not going to be the cleanest, but I'm going to try to get it as clean as I can. Make a selection here. Let's get some of the mountain ranges in the back here. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fill. I'm going to invert this and I'm going to fill it with black. And we're going to get this. It's kind of really dramatic here because it's like covering everything. But I'm going to fill the frame, or I'm going to marquee the frame, make a selection on the frame. I'm just going to go ahead and reveal this side. And this is going to immediately give us the illusion that this is being front lit. And the reason why I darken the background is to really sell the point that this object is being front lit. And typically if you guys look at a lot of front lit objects, whether it's a photograph or a painting, you'll notice that the sky or the object behind it is going to be relatively darker, mainly because it has to do with the amount of exposure, but also just the direction of light. Light is hitting this here, and the sky is going to be darker, right? Because the sun is on the other side. So even when we look at some of the photo examples here on this front lit object, notice the sky here is actually darker. It's dark enough that, you know, we're able to distinguish the objects that are being lit in the front and the shadows being in the back. And the sky, where the sky is actually lighter, we know that the sun is directly either on top or it's going to be directly in front of the object here, or behind the object, in order to get a backlit object here. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I've got a very stylized front lit mound of dirt. So let's just kind of go over the examples that we have here. We just kind of mark all this stuff down. So to start off, we had our top lighting, our back lighting, our side lighting, and our front lighting. So I hope you guys understand this portion. Feel free to try out this demo. I have the drawing here if you guys want to follow the exercises. Feel free to do that, and we'll move on to the next demo.